looks like we have most of the group together. So, well, if somebody else comes along, she will be welcome. In the meantime, maybe we can get started. So, okay, we have something in the chat. Yeah. Eva's cat already has some fans in the group. Although we just see the back. All right. So let me change view and maybe we can get started. All right. So thank you for joining us tonight. We have chosen this topic based on, well, first of all, we have recently watched a movie with this title, They Live. And somebody reminded me, Carl reminded me that used to have an exclamation mark at the end. And now for some reason, the exclamation mark is gone. Some call this the Mandela effect. You may remember it was different. I personally, on this case, cannot remember what it was, but there are other cases where I clearly have a different memory. Then, of course, the main reason is we found that the topic explored in the movie is a very meaningful and important slice of what our experience has been regarding the control system and our way to interact with it. So we thought that that was a perfect title for talking about the experiences we've gone through when searching for the truth behind the veil. Because what we have found is that often during your search, you have to overcome several layers of illusion and deception. So the idea of a reality which is completely bleak and oppressive, as opposed to an artificial appearance which is colorful and nice, is a very strong metaphor of what we would like to share with you. So our idea is to give some of the typical steps that we have seen, not only in our case, but also in others, where a sincere seeker has gone on a search. And the starting point would be that within each of us, save some exceptions that we will just leave out for the side, but most of us have a divine spark inside whose main goal is to go back to its source. It's what we call the mystical attraction of the absolute, or say the source from which we are coming. And the road to the source is full of obstacles. Now, when we are children, we cannot easily get away from the programming that comes from our surrounding environment. So it's just natural that at first we will be drawn into whatever religion or belief is present in our family or environment. So we may find ourselves as children sitting in a church, a mosque, or some other building, attending a service. And for many people, that is the way they will take care of their spirit for all their lives. But then, some of us, like you probably, and like us, feel that there is something that is not really adding up. There is something strange that doesn't feel quite right in that organization, in the rituals, in the hierarchy, and in the doctrine, in their beliefs, etc. So we start asking questions. Soon we realize that the people who officially are in charge of the knowledge, they don't want to hear those questions, because not only they don't have an answer, but this is quite unsettling for some of them, because it reminds them that they should have asked those same questions themselves in the first place, and they haven't, or they have, and they accepted a half-baked answer. So they may feel a sort of uneasy situation when we remind them that basically they have given up on the search for the truth. But the main effect is we ask, for example, what is the possibility to match together the idea that God knows what my future will be and the fact that I will be judged on my actions, considering that he knows everything already? Why does he bother to let me do all of my mistakes and all of my choices? Things like that. So our teachers and priests and let's say the hierarchy in the various churches doesn't like to hear these questions, and will just turn you away and say something that varies in a range from don't you dare to question God, or to you will understand later, or any excuse will do, but never a satisfactory answer. So there may come a point where we decide to part ways and do without our first, let's say, inherited religion or group or cult. Then we go about life without any particular affiliation to a religious group or belief. Then we encounter some problems. They seem to be overwhelming. We can't really see how they can be solved with the ordinary tools of the rational society that we are in. There is no explanation. There is no feeling of justice. We have undergone some big trouble. So we start again a search, and some synchronicities happen. They guide us towards some smaller niche religion or a smaller cozy group of people who look like they know the truth, and they welcome you, and they start a sort of love bombing where you feel everybody in that group really cares about you, and you are made to feel part of an elite. You are some of the very few selected ones, and something is built around you, which is a sort of wall, where the function of this wall is, of course, to keep you inside, but it looks like a protection wall, as if you are a sheep besieged by wolves around. And what is this wall made of? It's normally created out of fear. So you start hearing that you shouldn't really leave this group because of this and that consequence, or you've been selected and you shouldn't fail God that has given you this unique opportunity. So there are several ways in which the chief or the authorities in this group will try to make you understand that now that you're in, you can't go out. There are some extreme cases where there is actually a threatening and a sort of a criminal organization that takes care of keeping you inside. But normally what I've seen is that the blockage is built inside your mind, and it works just as well. Again, for many people, this will be their form of spirituality until the end of their lives. And yet, some, like you probably, and like us, they still want to go further, and they start questioning. And again, if they can overcome, or we can overcome our fears and this artificial wall, we jump out again and we look around. And our experience has been that after this second jump, basically immediately another sort of a religious group appeared in front of us to offer joining. It was a smaller Eastern religion that had a small center in Paraguay back then. We thought it was just a vegetarian restaurant. In fact, it was run by a very lovely family of people from Taiwan who offered us to listen to some interesting seminars. So they tried to attract us into their own religion. Very interesting, very lovely people. Again, they showed a very deep understanding of our feeling towards the old group. They say, oh, we're not like that. More doctrine, more teachings. And then comes a point where they say here, push comes to shove. So the moment of truth, they say, okay, you may come and join our services and rituals, but before you enter the main room, you must do a little pit stop in the side room and worship the 3 Buddhas. And I went, okay, so what is that? Why am I doing that? And of course, the explanation is a complex theory, and they explain a long heritage, why they inherited this teaching, and they represent properly the descendant of some great Buddha of 1,000 years ago, etc., etc. But again, we thought, doesn't sound right to us. Why am I worshipping sort of a creature that I don't understand? So we jumped out again. Then we met another group. It was about sort of Buddhism, a version of Buddhism. So we started attending the interesting days that they organized. They had practices, meditation, some theory. And then we've been invited to a ritual. And guess what? We had to kneel down and send our worshipping to 85 different Buddhas. So this time it was, and every time you had to kneel down. So we finished the day with our knees broken in pieces, but especially a big question mark on our heads. That is, again, we are made to worship beings that we don't understand and don't know. So again, we jumped out. This could go on forever. Every time the group is somehow more attuned to your specific way of feeling spirituality. So it becomes like tailor-made. Maybe there is a guru that is not exactly spiritual, but still he claims to have a connection to some beings in another dimension, and he's telling you that he has been in contact with aliens or ghosts or whatever. And he tries to appeal to those things that for you are most interesting. So there is a cult or a group for all tastes. You name your passion, there will be a group for you. And you will find that if you jump out enough times, some point it will appear under after you, before your eyes, just as if it was waiting. So it's like a series of networks for fish, and each one has a smaller mesh. And if you sneak through one, there is another which is a little smaller, and so on and so forth. So each time the group is smaller, is more tailor-made for you, and you are asked to worship something that you don't understand. So who runs these groups? Each time we found that there is a hierarchy there, sometimes more complex and bigger, sometimes is smaller, or a single person or guru. These people are normally like us, that is, they have started with a personal quest, and at some point they have bumped into some experience in the subtle worlds. For example, they have had an abduction or a series of abduction, or they have met some beings in the astral dimension that have convinced them that they have a special mission and they have to listen to their instructions and let's say the rules to create a sort of little church. In some cases, we have seen these people have been convinced that they are in the subtle worlds just in front of Jesus Christ or other very, very high characters in the spiritual doctrine. And they are asked to surrender their bodies to some entities that will come and replace their original soul. And if you are convinced enough that you are talking with, say, Buddha or Jesus, then you may actually welcome such an exchange. Of course, they are being deceived. So there comes a time, or at least for some gurus, that they may say they've undergone a process of inner exchange, substitution, that what was before is no longer, and now there is a new I speaking. Now, this seems to create problems to these people in that they often suffer from a very poor health. It seems that if you force a spirit which is not of a human nature into a human body, something doesn't work as it should. So you end up with a very sick individual that may show some, say, some constant illnesses that never seem to recover. There is also something that we found is a very big red flag and indicator of these sort of people. And it is the look in their eyes. So if you come in close contact with one of these people, you may see that there is something missing in their eyes, or something that looks like there is no life. This is probably the reason why at least two of the people we have met that were supposed to be great masters, they avoided every single eye contact with their supporters or fans. Or they hid behind black glasses, or they simply looked elsewhere when we were close by, or they refused to meet us altogether. And we didn't understand this until we had an opportunity to see a famous writer from the East that was reading at a conference in Italy. And he always appeared in public or in recordings with black sunglasses. On that day, instead, we saw him without his accustomed black glasses. And we couldn't recognize him at first because the look in his eyes was so strange, so far away from a normal human look, that we thought he was another person. And then we realized, and everything clicked in place, and we understood why in the past several people had refused to make eye contact. So this is our experience. I see Eduardo has made a remark here, the way they look reptile-like. Sometimes they do. I cannot say how general that is, but sometimes the impression is just that. In other cases, I've had the impression I had a sort of shark in front of me, because you know what the shark eyes look like. You can tell they are alive, but they are not exactly like a human being. There is something missing there. As we said, there are ways to keep us trapped in these groups, and there are ways to claim our freedom. We think this is quite a big topic to be condensed in a single short conversation. So I'd like to maybe just mention now a bit more, and then leave the rest for a further conversation, and then leave you the opportunity to speak your truth and then share your experience. What I'd like to add now is what sort of powers we may expect in the people who run these groups. They are, we believe, often backed by forces or entities which are not exactly the common people or humans we see around. It may be beings from other planes, like you may see well described in Robert Monroe's books, for example, Far Journeys, beings that have no physical body. They live in, let's say, the astral world, but they interact easily with a human being because we have an astral part of our being that can interact. So we are like a Russian matryoshka, several bodies, one inside the other, and part of that is an astral body. Whether it's completely formed or not is a question that I'd like to know the answer to. But let's say we do have some part which is in the astral. So, closing parenthesis, these people normally are backed by creatures that enjoy some sort of power that is related to our minds. One of them, for example, is we have seen cases where this guru could read our minds. In other cases, we felt that there could be an injection of words and images into our heads. And then they can often move in the astral world in ways that we cannot really do very easily. So they can see things about us that we ourselves may ignore. So they may tell you things about you that you didn't realize you had, or mention something you've done 10,000 years ago that you can't really remember very well. But then you get a feeling that this is actually true. So you may expect that they have a great scope and visibility, which extends beyond what you know. On the other hand, they also have some weaknesses. And it's important to underline that these beings are not so superior to us, but they normally get you to think they are. And this is where their victory may come. So if we let ourselves be convinced that they are superior, then they will have the upper hand, and it's difficult for us to claim our freedom. So first weakness is they count on you to create their own power. So in other words, that you give over your power to them by feeling inferior. Another weakness is they cannot really afford an open and frank conversation with you without resorting to the authority that you have decided to give them. In other words, if they are not protected by their authority, their position is very fragile. Their doctrines are full of contradictions. They are full of strange things that cannot be explained and do not withstand a proper critical analysis. So the only way they can continue to remain in a position of fake superiority is to refuse an open confrontation. So in other words, they will be afraid of the truth. They will try to avoid you speaking the truth in front of them or in their presence, or in any way putting them in front of a reality that they know can dismantle their castle of lies. So it is important to remember that we are not inferior to them, but we may feel as such if we have developed a certain type of personality. So we, for example, we always want somebody to tell us what to do, or we feel that we are unable to face life by ourselves, etc. So these makes us more susceptible to become their prey. There is so much that we could add, but durante la registrazione. Okay. So I will now let Daniela tell us a bit of a story, and then if we all agree, we will stop the recording and move on.
Dunque, ho un po' ne ho tante cose da raccontare, ma racconterò solo qualche piccola...
She also has a lot to tell, but she will just do a little bit now.
Inizierò con una storia quando vivevamo in Italia in una casa di montagna.
Okay, so everything starts when we lived in a small house in Italy on the mountains.
Avevo iniziato a sentirmi strano da un paio di giorni, di sere. Sentivo che qualcosa mi voleva tirar fuori.
So for a couple of days, especially at night, she had felt strange, as if something was trying to come out or being drawn out of her.
Però una sera mi sentì così male perché insisteva di tirarmi fuori come l'anima.
But one night she felt really bad because she had this clear impression that something was trying to extract something out of her, like a soul being drawn out.
È una sensazione che in parole è difficile da spiegare.
It's hard to explain in common words.
E stavo così male e ho avuto come cercavo di fare qualsiasi pratica che io sapessi per stare centrata, con tutte le forze, di tenere quello che mi apparteneva.
She tried to counterbalance this by resorting to all the techniques and the practices that she knew in order to avoid to lose this fight.
Però ovviamente probabilmente usano tecnologia o non lo so, era molto forte.
But this type of force was too strong for her to resist.
Mi alzai e camminavo da una parte all'altra sperando che spostandomi era differente.
So she got up and trying to walk around quickly from one side to the other, trying to shake off this feeling.
E poi mi è venuto come una convulsione di un vomito che non era normale.
And then she had a sort of a reflex to throw up, something that had no reason to happen.
Non era come una convulsione stranissima di qualche oggetto dentro che il corpo non lo vuole.
It was like a convulsion where your body is trying to get rid of something that it doesn't want.
E stavo così male che di notte ci siamo decisi, tu mi hai portato all'ospedale giù nella valle, giù dalla montagna.
So we decided to take her to the hospital that was at the bottom of the mountain.
Al pronto soccorso.
To a first aid place, an emergency, an accidents and emergency place.
Era 1 o le 2 di notte, credo.
It was about 2 o'clock in the morning.
E arrivammo lì e al pronto soccorso era stranissimo, non c'era nessuno, solo un medico.
There was a single doctor there.
Era una cosa strana.
And it felt a bit strange.
Perché di solito c'è gente sempre a qualsiasi ora.
Because normally there's more people and nurses.
Mi ha messo su un lettino.
So she made her lie on a bed.
Mi ha prelevato sangue.
Took some blood samples.
Altre analisi.
Ran some tests.
Poi si è avvicinato a me.
And then walked up to her.
Mi ha guardato così fisso.
Looked her straight in the eyes.
E mi ha detto, hai paura di morire?
And told her, you are afraid to die, aren't you?
Dopo sono uscita da te e ci siamo andati.
Then she was released, she came out and we just went away.
Sono rimasta pietrificata di questa esperienza.
Yeah, she felt like petrified by this experience.
Perché non era un essere umano.
Because that didn't feel like a human being.
oppure parlava attraverso un altro.
or something was talking through him.
Questa è una delle cose. Poi
This is one of the things that she wanted to mention.
vi racconto quella. Quando stavo qua a letto e di notte sentivo che mi faceva male un occhio.
Once she was here sleeping in her bed, and she felt like a pain in her eye.
Però dormivo e poi mi sono svegliata.
So then she woke up.
E avevo percepito che c'era qualcuno.
And she had perceived there was something around, or somebody.
Avevo percepito che mi stava facendo qualcosa
Like
all'occhio.
something, doing something to her eye.
E mi sono alzata rapido per vedere se c'era qualcuno in
So
casa.
she got up quickly to see if there was somebody around.
E in quel momento sotto abbiamo il sensore della luce.
And in that very moment,
in giardino.
outside of our window, where we have an infrared sensor, that sensor triggered and turned on the light.
È stata una cosa strana perché non ci sono animali, non c'è niente che...
Was very, very strange because there were no animals or other things around that.
E so che ci sono esseri che possono attraversare muri e possono...
So she knows about creatures that can go through walls.
E per qualche motivo che non lo so, quel sensore ha percepito qualcosa di solido, di materiale.
So for some reason that sensor seemed to have caught something passing by.
Ho sempre avuto delle esperienze che cercavano di farmi danno sulla mia salute.
So she often had experiences where something was trying to create a damage to her.
Questa è un'altra. Poi un'altra che volevo raccontarvi. Quale posso raccontare? Vi racconto un'altra cosa.
One more thing.
È successa in Inghilterra.
That happened in England as well.
Quando siamo andati a un centro di buddisti.
We went to a Buddhist center.
E c'era un sacco di gente che partecipava.
Lots of people taking part to a meeting.
Noi a volte andiamo in questi punti per vedere cosa stanno facendo e come.
We often go to have a look at what they're up to and how they do that.
Siamo un po' come a ispezionare certi posti.
Like sort of investigators.
A un certo punto la persona che parlava ci dice adesso faremo una pratica, chiudete gli occhi, passerà vicino a voi una persona.
And then we were told to just sit down, close our eyes and go through a sort of meditation, and somebody will be going through and do something.
E questa persona faceva dei movimenti, faceva come un nodo sopra le teste delle persone.
She didn't keep her eyes closed, and she saw this person that was behind each of us, and she was doing movements and like tying knots above our heads.
E subito mi è venuto come una rabbia tremenda.
So she felt like an impulse of rage. What is she doing to us?
E l'ho detto davanti a tutti, ma perché non chiedi permesso e spieghi quello che stai facendo?
And in front of everybody, she shouted, "Why don't you ask for our permission before you do this?"
E spiegare cosa sta facendo.
And explain what you're doing.
Questa è una delle cose che viene fatto alle persone senza aver coscienza.
This is something that people undergo without being aware of that, just for attending a free session in one of these big Oriental style centers.
E E qualcuno in sala, infatti, sembra che sia qualcuno svegliato e ha detto infatti perché non ci hai detto cosa
And
fai?
some other people in the room seemed to wake up when she spoke and said the same thing. So why aren't you asking my permission? What are you doing?
E questo ci attira l'attenzione di stare molto attenti in vigilia in tutto quello che facciamo con altri.
So this is a call for all of us to be very attentive, very much aware of what we do or what people do to us.
C'ho diverse storielle che devo raccontare.
Faremo anche un'altra sessione.
Adesso mi devo ricordare, sì. Diciamo, mi ricorderò qualcuna
Okay.
più ne ho tante. Okay.
There's more to come when we next meet. So, thank you, Daniela.
Okay.
What I'd like to do now is I will stop the recording. Sam has clapped his hands. Dice hai fatto bene a parlare. So I will now stop the recording and we will cross into